Pearl Abyss is absolutely amazing at monetizing their content and having players spend money on their games. Regardless of your view on pay to win or the sustainability of PA's monetization strategies, we can all agree that PA makes a lot of money with Black Desert Online. Now, when PA released the sealed Ancient Book of Combat and Life on the Pearl store, I was immediately reminded of one of my favorite videos on YouTube called Let's Go Whaling. This video was a synopsis on how to get players to spend money on video games, and was made by the CEO of Tribeflame, Torulf Jernström. It goes over around 20 different psychological methods to get players to spend money, and is definitely worth the watch. I thought it would be cool to make a video seeing how many of these different psychological methods PA utilizes with these new sealed Ancient Books of Combat and Life. For people who don't know, the sealed Ancient Book of Combat and Life are a new addition to the Pearl store added this week for global servers, and last week for BDO Korea, Southeast Asia, Taiwan, and some other servers. Both these items can be unsealed whenever, which start their 7-day timer. These items can be continuously used and automatically popped by a fairy's continuous care skill within those 7 days. The Book of Combat gives a bunch of side buffs along with notably a 20% drop rate buff, while the Book of Life gave some of the same buffs along with 50% life experience, 25% mastery, and 2 energy recovery. Currently, the only way to get these items in NA is to buy them in an 8,335 Pearl pack. That includes some other items like crons, fail stacks, and buffs. Again, this video isn't about my feelings on these books, it just talks about how many psychological methods PA uses with these books to get players to spend pearls. If you want to know about my thoughts on these items, I do already have a video released that talks about them, and that will be linked below. So now that we know all about these items, let's get into the first psychological trick that PA utilizes. The first thing PA uses is a phenomenon called anchoring. That is where the first price that humans see a new, unknown item being sold for is the price we anchor for that item moving forward. If we see an item being sold less than its initial price, we'll think that it's a good deal and worth getting even if it has no intrinsic value. When looking at the sealed Ancient Book of Combat and Life, the first thing players notice is that it's only purchasable in an $80 pack. This does 2 different things. The first thing is that it anchors the value of these books at $80 regardless of the other items in the bundle. The only way to currently get these books is to pay $80, and these books are the new shiny items that most people focus on when looking at these packs, as they are both new items with new mechanics. PA explicitly hid the other items, which are all reused basic items that we've all seen before, into their own little box to draw more attention to these new books. All these items are included in this pack to pump up the price of this bundle, so players anchor the value of these new ancient books a lot higher. The second thing that this does is make these new pay-to-win introductions to the Pearl store a lot less threatening for most players. Because it is in such an expensive $80 pack, and generally not going to be worth buying for most people, a lot of players ignore this pack and say these ancient books don't really matter as almost no one will buy them or use them. How this allows PA to convince players to spend pearls is extremely smart as it plays the long game. Most people won't even look twice at this pack or even consider buying it. But in the future, PA can re-release this item a part of another pack or even as a standalone item. If the pack only costs $30 or the standalone item costs $20 or $10, this may make these books seem extremely worth it to get, as they're no longer at the $80 price point that they once were. On top of that, players won't feel as threatened by these items since they're no longer the new shiny releases that push pay to win, but re-releases of items that we've already seen before on the Pearl store. No one really gets surprised when they see the Blessing of Kama Sylvia re-released in a bundle, as it's a completely normalized item in Black Desert Online. Another big bonus of obfuscating the value of these books by combining them with a very expensive pack is that if PA wants to re-release these items in the future, they won't need to put these items on sale or anything like that, as the inflated price of this bundle has players subconsciously anchor the value of these books extremely high. The 1-2 punch of anchoring these items' values extremely high and making it less threatening is one of the brilliant ways that PA convinces players to spend more money on their game. However, we've only talked about the anchoring effect. Moving on, the next psychological effect that PA employs is pretty core to how the Pearl Shop has always functioned. This is loss aversion and the scarcity effect, more modernly known as the fear of missing out. Loss aversion is when people are more attached to what they have than what they can gain. Generally, you would have to offer something extremely tempting for them to risk giving up what they currently have. Scarcity is where there's a limit on an item and these items will go away/expire and no longer be indefinitely purchasable or usable. PA has classically had a ton of things that proc the scarcity and loss aversion effect on people, like all of their temporary deals or limited Pearl Store items. The Sealed Ancient Book of Combat and Life proc these effects 3 times. It is a limited bundle on sale, it is a limited item that doesn't always sit on the Pearl Store, and the item itself expires after 7 days of use. This incentivizes players to buy this item as they don't know if it will ever come back and if they will ever be able to use these buffs again. This gives them the fear of missing out and losing the opportunity to buy these books. Once you have these buffs and the 7-day timer runs out, you'll want to regain these buffs and buy it again to keep them going. This is one of the ways that PA procs the loss aversion effect. Both these effects play off of deep-seated psychological functions to convince players to spend pearls now on these items that may not ever come back again. Again, it seems almost normalized since PA's Pearl Store almost always had limited deals and has a lot of event-based limited items. However, that doesn't make PA selling the Sealed Ancient Books as limited items benefit any less from these psychological phenomenon. Now, the 3 effects we've talked about so far, the anchoring, scarcity, and loss aversion, is all very meta and about the Pearl Store itself and how they manipulate the Pearl Store to get players to spend more money. Next up, we'll be discussing why PA keeps releasing these types of items to get players to keep spending pearls. Now, what is the type of item that the Sealed Ancient Book of Combat and Life are? Much like the Grandpa Kron's fishing rod, it is an item that doesn't have any inherent value, but it increases the efficiency and the reward of doing certain tasks. This procs a very interesting phenomenon called the IKEA effect. According to Wikipedia, the IKEA effect is a cognitive bias in which consumers place a disproportionately high value on products that they partially created. What this means is that people feel a lot more attached to an item if they themselves have to put in a little bit of work into making it. One popular example we have of this in video games are battle passes, where people have to work and progress the pass to get all the rewards rather than straight up buying those items. Even in battle pass situations where you're allowed to spend money to purchase the entire pass, I doubt you could say a lot of people feel very rewarded when they do that. As mentioned before, these books don't inherently have any silver value. The way they work is by boosting the silver you get from grinding or life skilling. This allows players to feel a lot more attached to these items as they have to put a little bit of work themselves to fully take advantage of them. On top of that, it allows players to feel like they aren't just buying power as they have to interact with game mechanics to progress their account. This has the side effect of making players more hooked into BDO and increases player retention, rather than just simply increasing the number of players that spend pearls on BDO. Now, whether or not you believe this is a good or bad thing, the IKEA effect most certainly increases the value players put on items and their Black Desert Online account, making them more likely to buy them along with creating more player retention. This is a strategy that PA has very smartly employed with these new Sealed Ancient Books of Combat and Life. Now, the IKEA effect isn't perfectly mirrored by these Ancient Books of Combat and Life, since we aren't putting effort into making or getting an attachment towards the books themselves. Rather, we're using these books to make our accounts better and create a higher attachment towards our BDO accounts. One of the core aspects of these books, however, is that they are a temporary item that expires. PA doesn't want people to become attached to these books, rather the buff it gives and the effect it has on their accounts. Because of this, these books are more similar to a subscription that only provides value if you keep coming back and working on your account with the bonuses that they provide. Subscriptions are another effect that increases player spending and player retention, as mentioned with the IKEA effect. It pushes players to continuously spend money and to continuously play the game. This is a core reason why PA decided to make these books of combat and life a type of item that expires after 7 days. The IKEA and subscription effect is a core reason why PA decided to make these ancient books of combat and life what they are. PA wants to keep pushing items like these in the Grandpa Kron's fishing rod, as they are items that run out but give a temporary account boost that people want. These types of items are incredibly tempting for players to buy due to the IKEA and subscription effect. So now that we know why PA pushes these types of items, we have to find out the type of player who buys these items. Once we know the type of player, we can find out why it's so rewarding for PA to cater towards these players, furthering the reason why they continue to release these types of items. There are two core concepts that determine what type of player you are. The first is what you look for in a game, and the second is the progression of your account. One of the ways to determine what a player looks for in a game is through the Bartle type test. This is a pretty simple test that separates players into 4 different personality types. We have the achievers, socializers, killers, and explorers. Achievers are those who want to complete the game and get gear. Socializers are those who are more interested in role-playing and talking to other people. Killers are those interested in PvP content, while explorers are those who want to immerse themselves into the world. These different categories are important as it determines what type of items these players are willing to buy. Achievers generally want to pay for convenience, socializers want character and general customizations, killers want competitive advantage, and explorers want more content. The interesting thing that PA does with the sealed ancient books of life and combat is that they are able to be sold to both the achievers and killers. This is because these books allow players to progress, get more gear, and from that gain a competitive advantage. This allows these types of items that increase progression, such as the sealed ancient books of combat and life, to help both achievers and killers. This is unique in some MMOs, as gear in Black Desert Online helps give players a competitive advantage in uncapped player versus player content. Having gear does also somewhat help even in capped node wars, since sovereign weapons allow for reforges, and different crystal sets allow for more damage even in capped node wars and siege content. This is part of the reason why PA is continuing to push items that give explicit account progression, as that caters towards 2 groups of the 4 groups mentioned. One type of item catering to 2 or more groups increases the amount of people that are going to spend money on their game. Another very interesting conclusion of the Bartle type test is that the items which make progression more convenient and easier are the simplest for game developers to develop for. Customization items for socializers are nice, but do require PA to put more effort into making specific character outfits that players are willing to buy. Content for explorers also takes a lot more development time, and we can see that in how long it takes PA to release new regions. They don't really want to gatekeep these new regions with money, as they want players to interact with the regions and continue their gear progression. The final segment, account progression, is just so much easier to monetize. PA releasing a new item that gives additional drop rate, like the sealed ancient books of combat and life, just takes a little bit of coding and sprite creation. The dual effect of pay for progression items being what most player types are willing to pay for, along with them being the easiest to create and monetize, is part of the reason why PA continues to push these types of items. When PA pushes these ancient books of combat and life, more players are willing to spend pearls. Moving on to the second concept to determine a player's type is by looking at the progression of their account. We have 3 generalized progression points: hook, habit, and hobby. The beginner player who needs to get hooked into the game, those who have made the game a habit and are still progressing their gear, and finally those who have reached the end of gear progression who are playing the game as a hobby. These generalized progression points are made more towards gacha games and don't fit perfectly into BDO, as it takes a lot of time to get hard capped and not a lot of players are hard capped in the hobby stage. The hobby stage for BDO are more players who have reached soft cap gear, able to grind in endgame grind zones and participate in capped PvP, and are pushing towards hard capped gear. The main idea of splitting players into 3 types of groups is to be able to find ways to monetize to these players. Those in the hook stage need cheap, high-value icebreakers to normalize spending money in the game. This is important, but the sealed ancient books of combat and life do not cater towards these types of players. It caters towards the next 2 groups. The habit stage of players want items that give them accelerated progression for their gear. These books definitely cater towards these players as it allows them to get more silver and gear from grinding and life skilling. Finally, the hobby group of players want more consumables to use that enhances their already gotten gear. Again, since BDO is a bit different, these sealed ancient books help hobby players as it enhances their grinds, which they're using their soft gap gear for. These books are consumable, so you'll have to continue buying them rather than them just being a one-time purchase to help increase your gear. PA really wants to sell items like the sealed ancient books of combat and life since they are sold to both the habit and hobby group of players. But we still haven't talked about the most important part of these 3 groupings, and it's that companies want to focus on selling to the hobby stage players as consumables, unlike the other items, have an infinite spending cap. Since these items expire or are used, players will always want to keep buying them over and over again. The only group of people in the hobby stage who wouldn't want to purchase these ancient books are those who are at complete hard cap and have no more items to possibly work on, which is basically no one considering how Pen-Falling God armors still exist. This is why PA focuses on items that increase progression and are consumable, as it caters towards a bunch of their players along with being able to be infinitely purchased and give them more money. So far, we've went over the psychological tricks PA uses to manipulate their Pearl store to get people to spend more money, why PA pushes items like the sealed ancient books of combat and life, and how these books cater to most of their players. PA pushing these books to most of the players allows them to get more players to spend money. The last topic we'll talk about is how PA designed BDO to push these types of items like the sealed ancient books of combat and life. Part of how PA gets people to continue spending money on Black Desert Online without buying anything that gives additional content or cosmetics is how they structure the game. The core of BDO is that it was a gacha system with almost infinite progression. Even though the Agris Forge system does give a pity now for enhancing, and it is easier to get to hard cap, the system is still built around gacha RNG and an infinite gear treadmill. The reason why gacha systems give PA more opportunities for people to spend money is that it increases the time it takes to get what you want, and in some cases, there's no way to guarantee that you get that item. This gates progression behind RNG and sometimes a long grind towards pitying the item. This also gives people more retention towards the game since people always like the gambling aspect of gachas and have more time to play the game. Part of how the sealed books of combat and life take advantage of this is the biggest buff people are talking about, which is the increased drop rate of the book of combat. The core mechanic of drop rate is that it increases the chance of getting items that are not guaranteed. Of course, in regular grinds, this is usually just chalked up as an increase in silver per hour, but when grinding some treasure items or rarer items that can't be purchased, it can be pretty important to have. If you could simply buy all items or have a guaranteed way to get every single item, there would really be no use for drop rate, as you would just be guaranteed to get an accessory or rare item every pack. Now, part of why people are so tempted to spend money to get items that give you more silver or drop rate is because of the infinite gear treadmill system. If PA had designed a game where hardcap was pretty achievable in a short time for the average player, there would be little reason for people to have to spend money on these items that increase progression. Most people would be okay with simply grinding and not having to buy these extra book buffs. The bloat and the length it takes for players to get to endgame is a very intentional aspect of game design. The system of RNG and the near infinite gear progression that BDO is designed around helps convince players to spend more money on the game. Without these mechanics, people wouldn't have such a draw to spend money, especially on items that are catered towards making progression easier. So, we looked at all the different psychological methods PA uses to get people to spend money on their game, and most importantly, found out why PA has an incentive to keep pushing these types of items that help player progression. It is all because this is how PA designed their game, along with how efficient these items are in getting most BDO players to spend pearls. As mentioned earlier, the topics we went over is simply some of the psychological methods mentioned in the video we linked, and how they affect only the sealed ancient books of life and combat. There are definitely many other methods that are used by PA outside of these books that could be considered a lot more effective on the psychological front. The video we referenced and linked is just one presentation made by one guy, and it was intentionally intended to be aimed towards mobile game developers, not even PC MMOs. There are definitely a lot more topics that are not mentioned in this video. The interesting thing is that we know from experience that mobile games are generally a lot more predatory when it comes to getting people to spend money, so it is surprising to see how many things can be associated to just one item in BDO. This point really leads us to the main takeaway that I have for this video. Hopefully, if you made it to the end, you're a little bit more receptive to what I have to say. First things first, there is absolutely nothing wrong with spending money on video games. I do it all the time. However, you have to be aware that most games are designed in a way to extract as much money from you as humanly possible. As long as you're aware of these methods and making informed purchasing decisions, then there really is nothing wrong about it. That being said, you may not want to support the direction that PA is going with BDO, releasing more of these chaotic, mobile game-like monetization items to boost player progression. We went over why PA keeps releasing these types of items, like the sealed ancient books and Grandpa Kron's fishing rod, and it's because in the system that they've created, these items are what players seek to buy to boost their accounts. Since players are self-interested, it makes sense why they continue to buy these items, but it doesn't mean that we can't talk about them, push back, and wish for things to be different. I find most people dislike being taken advantage of and played for their money. I think most players should want PA to monetize and earn money on their game through actual interesting additional content rather than just playing off of the psyche of their player base. Again, even if you buy every single one of these progression boosting items, due to the psychological reasons that we've talked about, you can still be against PA releasing more of them in the future. But that is simply just my opinion on the matter. Everyone has their own thoughts, and I'm more than interested to see what you all have to say. Either way though, I hope you all learned something from this video, and I hope to see you all next time.